Welcome to the latest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast. I'm Lance Medow. He's John Schmeelk. We're continuing to break down the 2023 draft class, and today we're focusing on the team's second-round pick, 57th overall, Minnesota center John Michael-Schmitz. And to get more into John Michael-Schmitz and what he'll bring to the Giants, we are joined by the head coach of the Golden Gophers, none other than PJ Fleck. Coach, greatly appreciate the time. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Everything's going elite. Thanks for having us on the show, and we're really excited to have another Gopher with the New York Giants, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Joining Carter Coughlin, and maybe he'll be brought up in the dialogue as we move forward here. But, Coach, I want to start, obviously, with your very strong ties to John Michael. You go all the way back to when he was considering coming to Western Michigan. Then 2017, you get the Minnesota job. He follows you, and he mentioned he did not even visit the campus. He just said, hey, Coach Fleck wants me to come to Minnesota, sign me up. So what were those conversations like, and why were you able to build such strong ties with him?
Well, first of all, I mean, he fit everything what the Roll the Boat culture is about, what we're about within our walls, whether that's at Western Michigan or Minnesota. It's all about the people, and it's all about fit. And I think the best NFL teams have the best cultures and have the best fit and connectivity, and that's what we're all about. And it was really easy to tell John Michael-Schmitz was going to fit our program. He was tough, South Side of Chicago kid. If you've ever met his mother, you would know exactly what I'm talking about. She's one of the toughest people I've ever met. And he just fit the rebuild at Western Michigan. It was going to be so easy to be able to bring him in there. But obviously then we got the job here. And I called about 6-7 players and basically re-offered them. And my whole line to them was, listen, I know you haven't seen it, but neither have I. So all we're doing is taking our culture and we're plugging it in Minnesota. Instead of going to Michigan or Western Michigan, just drive a little further to the west and a little farther north. And it took a lot of courage from a lot of those players, but the success that they've had, including John Michael, I mean, it says a lot about that first meeting and the trust they had in us, trust they had in our program, the trust to stick around, to keep developing, to maximize your draft status, to find the right fit. And that's what life's all about. And absolutely love the young man. And the New York Giants fan base is going to be really excited to get him.
And we'll certainly talk more about him as a person, Coach. But I'm wondering, how much did his multi-sport background intrigue you when you recruited him to go to college? Because I always think having a multi-sport background for these athletes is important. It trains different muscles. He was a wrestler. He played basketball. He played baseball. How did that kind of go into your recruiting process to make you believe he was the right guy for your program from a physical standpoint?
Well, for us, I mean, multi-sport athletes is part of the requirement to actually be recruited by us. A lot more at Western Michigan because it was a little less popular to be specialized, almost a decade ago, right? So now it's a little bit more of that, but we were still probably 85% of our football team is all multi-sport athletes, even here at Minnesota. I love multi-sport athletes competing all year round. There's nothing wrong with training and specializing, but I prefer because as a head coach, you don't ever get a chance to leave campus. They keep us here like prisoners at times, So, we can't go on the road recruiting in May. So when I go out, I want to watch the kid play basketball. I want to watch him wrestle. I want to watch him compete besides a football game. And a lot of times we can't go watch football games because we're taking care of our own team. Our assistants are going to go out, but a lot of the head coaches don't travel. So it was imperative that we had multi-sport athletes, still is to this day. But watching his feet and you watch how competitive he was and how tough he was. You can tell a lot by watching somebody else play another sport and know their DNA as an athlete, period. And it doesn't matter what sport they play. I wasn't recruiting him as a basketball player, thank God, right? Because we wouldn't have taken him. But you watched him as a football player play basketball. It matched the style of play that he had on the football field as well.
What did he play in baseball? Just out of curiosity. Was he a pitcher? Or did he catch? He looks like a catcher.
I thought he caught.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Coach, from a basketball standpoint, he probably would do the dirty work rebounding the basketball. So you probably would have found a role for him in some capacity, though. You figure?
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, he'd be an enforcer. You'd have to go in. You bring him in when you want to get those fouls up. Get into the bonus or something, or take somebody out of the game. He is a gritty player, and he's nasty and all in the positive way. But what a team player he's going to be.
Well, speaking of that grittiness and that nastiness, I think if you look at your track record on offense over the last few years, you've had one of the best run games in college football. And clearly, John Michael-Schmitz is a big reason behind that. How does that nastiness and that grittiness transfer over to what he brings to the running game?
Well, first and foremost, I mean, most of football's won in between the trenches. And I think we all know that. If you can win up front, offensive line and defensive line, you're going to win a lot of games, whether that's in college football or that's in the National Football League. And, we've taken two jobs that primarily didn't have recent modern day success at a really high level. And we teach our players how to go win games. I think we're like 40-2 when we're up at halftime, but in reverse, we're like, I don't know, 6-36 or something when we're losing at halftime. It's some astronomical number, but we both of the jobs I've had have been in the North. Both jobs are really tough weather in November, and that's when championships are won. And you have to be able to set the tone for what you're going to be as a program and that game by basically punching the other guy in the mouth and say, we're going to run the football. We're going to run the football, but we're still going to have success doing it. And that's imposing your will on somebody. And that's the type of attitude and nastiness and toughness that John Michael-Schmitz brought to our football team. He's one of the greatest people off the field, one of the best connectors of a locker room than you'll ever meet. However, when he's on that football field, I mean, he is a nasty, nasty human being. And that's what you want, because you're creating that identity of what you're going to become as a program, especially when you're in the Big Ten, especially when you're in the North in the Mid-American Conference. You've got to be able to impose your will. And we believe strongly in that.
I'm allowed to joke about this because my wife's from Iowa and she has allowed me to do so. But the old expression, Midwestern nice coach, where, they're really nice, but then secretly they're like killing you. It seems like the way he flips his switch off the field, where he's just a big gregarious guy, and on the field, I was watching his tape with Sean O'Hara, our Super Bowl winning center who does broadcast for us. And he's finishing guys on the ground, not just on run plays, but on pass plays. It seems like he kind of has that, all right, I'm going to be this great guy off the field, but on the field, to your point, he's going to go out there and he's going to try to bury you.
Well, he loves the game. He loves the contact. He loves the physicality of it. He loves the dirty part of it. He loves the nasty part of it. The nastier, the better he plays. The filthier it is, it's like a pig, man. He's just rolling around in that mud, and he's the happier as he gets more mud on him. That's the type of player he is. And listen, there's nothing fake about the guy. He's probably the toughest football player I've ever been around as being a head football coach. He's incredibly intelligent, really smart. But to your point, it's not about that he just plays center or he's a good offensive lineman. That's what he does. How he plays the position separates him from everybody. And that's where in between that 6 seconds or 5 seconds, it's a dogfight and a rock fight with him every single play. And he knows he's not going to win every battle. That's the thing about him. His resilience to failing and his response mechanisms to failing make him an extraordinary player, because it's not about, you're not going to win every battle in the National Football League. And you're not going to win them all in the Big Ten, but especially in the NFL. Especially as a rookie. But how do you deal with that adversity? And do you get frustrated? Do you get discouraged? Or does it make you better? And I think that's where his strength is. That's his superpower is, again, the nastier it gets, even the more failing he gets, the better he's going to be, let alone the successes that are going to make him better. So he's one of those players that are going to play in the NFL for a very long time. A lot of people aren't going to really notice him until something wrong happens. And that's a good thing, because he's going to be so consistent in how he plays. And the coaching staff's going to know exactly what you're going to get out of him. And in that level, that's worth a lot more. That's the price of gold right there, is if you just know exactly what you're going to get out of a player, you can build your team around that. And I think people are going to know exactly from start to finish what they're going to get out of John Michael.
We're talking with Minnesota Golden Gophers head coach PJ Fleck here on the Giants Huddle podcast about the team's second-round pick, John Michael-Schmitz. And, coach, as you hit on, it's very good news when you're not talking about offensive linemen. That means something's right in the trenches. But what has been noticeable about his play is his unique snap and the fact that he relies on the dead ball snap. I know a lot of people have picked up on that. And for our viewers and our listeners to understand, he's snapping it essentially from the pointy top of the football as opposed to the side with the laces. How did that come about? I know Brian Callahan, your offensive line coach, played an integral role in that. And why did it seem to be so effective and a good fit for him?
Well, it wasn't just for John Michael. I mean, it was something that we wanted to do as a program years ago. And, you know, when we first got here, we were struggling with snapping the football. It wasn't just a center issue. It was a lot of people here that we had to like develop a center that wasn't really a center. And when he'd miss really poorly. And so Brian Callahan, who I think is one of the best offensive line developers in all of college football, back at Eastern Illinois, when he was there, he had a center who broke one of his fingers. And he then struggled snapping the normal way, the spiral way. And so Coach Callahan made him snap basically, you know, the tip up. And what we found from that, and what we found with our centers, is their misses were smaller, meaning that the miss radius was more manageable for the quarterback, and it was way easier on the hand, and the toss was easier to catch. So it was all around going to be easier for the center. It was going to be easier for the quarterback. And so we made the change holistically. And he just became really good at it from day one. I don't remember one snap that was ever bad from him. And I'm not sure what Coach Daboll's going to do and the whole staff, but he's really good at that. And we've seen that there's not much difference. As long as the quarterback's okay with it, you know, but I think he's going to like it even more than the traditional snap. So it originated from a young man breaking his finger at Eastern Illinois. But when we got here, we were like, man, we're really struggling with centers. And then we kind of went to it, and it was night and day. I mean, it was like we cured this disease. And so then we've never gone away from it since.
Was there a difference using that from shotgun versus under center, Coach?
No, I mean, the way they hold it for under center, we're both under center end of the gun. So it really didn't matter to us. As long as they don't get it confused, they'll be okay. But you know, when it's under center, it's snapped the traditional, you know, the traditional way most of the time. So I mean, he's just I don't think he's going to have a problem with that. That's for sure.
I have one more nerdy technique offensive line question, but he's 6'3", he's only 301. He's not the bulkiest guy, right? But watching him on tape, he just seems to get such good bend and leverage where he plays like a much bigger guy. Is that something that you guys worked with him on over his years at Minnesota? Because it seems like his ability to get low and just bend so well really helps his leverage against some of those really big defensive tackles he might have to go up against.
Well, that's where his wrestling background comes in, and just the ability to bend. You know, I mean, when you're going through the recruiting process, I mean, it's not just about is the kid good enough or not. You go through a series of different bending exercises and measurements, and you are really dissecting a whole player, just like they do in the National Football League. And bending's a really big part of that for us, especially with our inside zone game, our outside zone game. And then our gap schemes. I mean, we have to be able to have leverage. We're not going to have always the biggest offensive lineman or the tallest offensive lineman, but we got to win the leverage battle horizontally and vertically. And if you can do that, you're going to win a lot of football games and win a lot of one-on-one matchups, even if maybe you're not the best player in that matchup. So leverage wins. And I think he does such a great job with that. And he's so smart. He doesn't get enough credit with how fast his initial first step in his movement is. That's where he can capture stretches of three techniques. He can get to the second level really quick. I think the kid from Iowa last year was probably a little bit quicker getting up to that second and third level, but John Michael's way more powerful in my opinion, and he'll get there, but he can create movement, and that's key at your level, and win those leverage battles, which I think are going to help him.
Coach, another big aspect, obviously, of playing center is the intellect side of things. He's touching the football on every single play, and he's even focused on that since he's arrived on the scene with the New York Giants. And having a voice is, I'm assuming, a big part of being a center, whether it be on the field or off the field. How have you seen his voice evolve from the time you started working with him? You've been with him for 6 years, so obviously there's a lot of growth and dedication that's going behind the scenes in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, volume reflects confidence, period, right? And when you're a center, you can't be a meek and mild and quiet center. If you're a quarterback, you can't be a meek, mild, low-volume quarterback. That's part of the requirement for the position. All of us can talk louder. You don't have to have that naturally, but you better bring that out when you're on the field, or there's going to be a lot of people doing the wrong thing, right? And you have to over-communicate. He's so good at that. He had to develop that because by nature, John Michael's not this most outgoing personality and loud person. He's a wonderful leader. I mean, he can listen with the best of them. He can look around every corner and have answers, and he can lift everybody else around him. Those are the three characteristics of leadership: in our program, and he has all those. He's going to be just fine that way. He became one of the loudest players on this football team when he was on the field and even in the O-line room. But you don't have to scream and yell to get your point across. You just have to be loud, and you have to have confidence in your voice. And he has that. One thing is for sure, even if it isn't right, everybody will be on the same page. And as a coach, however you get there, they get scholarships too, and they have contracts across from you. However we get to it, we just all have to be doing the same thing. And he's incredibly intelligent. He's so smart. He'll make sure everybody's on the same page, and he will make sure that intellect of that O-line is up to his par.
You know, Coach, a lot of times there's a couple-year adjustment period from going from college to the pros for these guys, but John Michael was with you guys for 6 years, over 1,000 snaps at center. He started a ton of games for you guys. Is he as ready to make that transition as any player you've coached, given how much he played and how much experience he got with you at Minnesota?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's going to be just fine in that. And I think the benefit of what he's done is he is an older player. He's a grown man. Playing in the NFL, and this isn't any type of a comparison in a negative way, but I always tell people that the biggest jump in football is high school to college. Going from a high school level to the Big Ten is you're still a kid in high school, right? And once you get here, you're still a kid, but you're playing against 24-year-old grown men in college.
Right.
Once you hit the NFL, you're all grown men, right? They're all grown men. And they've all played. He's played against the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Auburns, the Penn States, and he's done it for 6 years, right? So he's not only experienced on the field, he's a grown man now. So he's going to transition right into that. When you're coming from high school to college, that's hard because your body is not developed like the seniors are going to play against. When you're in the NFL, you're all developed. It just comes back to confidence and your experience at that level. And he's so confident, he will rise to the occasion. And he's had so many battles with such great players already. That experience of just kind of getting around and the National Football League, he'll mesh with that very quickly. And you're going to see incredible growth really fast.
Well, and a product, Coach, of him playing for 6 years, and granted, one of them was a redshirt year, and obviously you were impacted by the pandemic, but we're talking about 57 appearances, 35 starts. What jumps out to me, he only missed 2 games, and only 1 due to injury. What have you seen from a durability standpoint, which, as you know, in any wavelength of football, first step is to actually stay on the field, and how reliable he was week in and week out, that you knew exactly who was going to be under center?
Well, Lance, he's a football player. And when you're a great football player, you understand that it's way bigger than you. You have a job to do and you have an expectation. We all have injury. We all get banged up. We all play through pain. That's part of this profession. That's part of the job. This is a different sport. This is a violent sport. So you are going to be hurt. You are going to have bumps and bruises. You are going to have things you're going to have to play through. That's the requirement of this job. As long as it's safe, you're going to have that. So he's done that his entire career, and he knows that there's an obligation from him to be there for his teammates. And he knows that we're a better football team with him on that field, right? And so he's already a true professional. He already knows what that takes. This isn't a guy that's going to, be on the field, off the field, on the field, off the field. He's got to scrape. He's going to have to just get that taped up and be out 20 plays. He is going to fight through everything. If anything, the trainers are going to have to pull him back, and the coaches are going to have to monitor him so he can have that longevity, because he has no regard for his own body. And, that can take you very far in that profession, but also you want the people to be able to take care of you so you can do that the right way.
Where do you think, Coach, he's most advanced from a scheme perspective? I saw a lot of great reach blocks on his tape. Is it outside zone? Is it gap? Do you like pulling him? In terms of run game scheme, where do you use him the most, and where do you think he's most advanced?
Well, I think you can use him in every scheme in the National Football League, right? But we are an inside-outside zone football team, period, right? With some mid-zone thrown in there. And then we don't run power. We just run some counter. So it's going to match the NFL run schemes. I mean, we do a lot of the same things that a lot of teams in the NFL do, but we are truly zone-based. And in the NFL, it's really hard to run a ton of gap schemes without the extra blocker, right? And that's why you see a lot of the Wildcat stuff with that. But with us, I mean, he's going to—
Not a lot of fullbacks anymore, Coach. Not a lot of fullbacks anymore.
Not as many, right? Not as many, but he's going to mesh really well, and he can be pulled. You can pull him. He's smart enough to do all of it, but he's so good in getting him running and then working up to that second level, whether that's outside zone or working the double teams on the inside zone.
Coach, last one for me in terms of what he's walking into. And I believe you had some changes on your offensive line during John Michael-Schmitz's tenure, so he had to adjust to new teammates. How do you think he'll be able to manage now being next to two completely different guards, the communication that's involved in that, and what you've seen out of your changes on the offensive line and how things relatively remain smooth?
Well, part of the reason he actually came back this year was, one, he obviously increase his draft stock, but two, he wanted to go win a championship. And three, the biggest thing he wanted to do was he goes, I want to make this my O-line. Like, it's mine, period. And I thought that was a huge statement. He had a bunch of seniors that were ahead of him. No, still, he was the leader of the O-line, but it wasn't his. He had a bunch of other guys coming in. We were going to have a whole bunch of new starters with Sam Schluter going to the NFL, Connor Olson becoming a doctor, Daniel Faalele being drafted by the Ravens. You know, he had to be able to take this new group and mesh it together. And he was so excited about doing that. And he did it so well. And so I have no worries about him walking into the Giants locker room, connecting all those linemen. And I bet you those veterans are going to think he's been there for 15 years within the first few months they're with him. That is priceless on the offensive line. And like I said, that's like gold. It really is, because that's something you can't teach. It just happens. And you're drafting that person to do that, and they're either going to do it or they won't. John Michael-Schmitz is definitely going to do it.
Final two-part question for me, Coach. One, not that the Giants are trying to move him off, but does he have any guard experience, or was he just a center for you guys, or did he work some guard in practice for
No,
you?
he can definitely play guard. We have another kid by the name of Nathan Bowe, who's our center right now, and we moved John Michael around. Even when we had a different center before him, we would move him at guard, center, and he can do anything. I mean, he's so smart. And he's so strong, and he's got great leverage, and he plays with such how that I think he can play guard or center. But we'll see what you guys decide to do with him. But he's naturally, I think, one of the best centers in all of college football, and that'll transition well over to the National Football League.
Second part of that question, real quick. We like to ask about opponents. You guys played Maryland a bunch over the last few years. Giants drafted Deonte Banks, the corner. Your thoughts on him, seeing him from afar and trying to go up against him and try to complete some passes on his side of the field?
Well, it was easy. We just didn't go to his side. It's pretty easy. I mean, we didn't throw the ball over the last few years a lot as it was. I think we were more 70-30 run pass. So yeah, it fit perfectly into playing against him, because he's a dangerous player. That's for sure.
Well, we are certainly looking forward to Coach John Michael-Schmitz and what he'll bring to the Giants. He is the head coach of the Golden Gophers, PJ Fleck. And who knows, Coach, Carter Coughlin, John Michael-Schmitz, maybe we'll talk to you 2 or 3 years down the road. Seems to be a trend here.
I would love it. We'd love the pipeline to go out there to New York. So good luck this year. Row the boat, Sky Mile. Go Gophers and go Giants. And thanks for having us on.
You got it. Our pleasure. This is the latest edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, which you can catch on Giants.com, the mobile app, and your favorite podcast platforms.